Hello and welcome back. I hope you're all well and staying safe in these troubling times. With the violence erupting in Jerusalem after illegal seizures from Israeli settlers and the deplorable raid on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, please try and raise awareness about this issue. This channel will always stand firmly with the Palestinian people and their struggle. The dust has started to settle on the results of the local, mayoral, Welsh and Scottish devolved administrations elections in the United Kingdom. God, that's a bit of word soup. There's been a furious drive to try and claim the narrative one way or another. What we're going to do today is look at those narratives and challenge their conclusions. First off, the Conservative Party won a historic victory in Hartlepool, a seat which has been Labour since the 1970s and is only the second time in the past 50 years that the governing party has taken a seat from the opposition. In every way, on the face of it, that appears to be a disaster, especially after Corbyn increased the vote share in 2017 and held on to it despite the disaster in 2019. And yet, in 2019, the combined vote share of the Brexit Party and the Conservatives outweighed Labour, making it unlikely for Labour to hold the seat. This, coupled with Labour's really poor ground campaign, made it an inevitability that Labour would lose the seat. In other areas, such as Sunderland and Durham, Labour shed councillors and councils, with 200 odd councillors losing their seats and losing control of, at the time of recording, a net of 8 councils. This is counterbalanced with Labour picking up in areas such as Cornwall, Peterborough, Falmouth and others that are solidly Conservative, increasing the vote in Scotland and in the Manchester mayoral election and the Yorkshire mayoral election. There has been a marked and noticeable shift in what voters are voting for, who they're voting for and importantly, where they're voting. The analyst Steve Ackhurst runs a great blog analysing this, and he also made this point, that young voters from northern towns who moved south are now moving into southern suburban commuter towns around London and the southeast, turning reliably solid Conservative seats into marginal seats and in some places knife-edge seats. There are 100 seats in which the Conservatives have a majority under 10,000, and 41 of these can be characterised under what you can call a blue wall or blue picket fence. They all voted Remain, have a large population below the interchange point of age, that's 41 years old, and tend to be more socially liberal. Labour has outperformed the national swing in both the last 2 elections in these places. In some ways, these areas are reminiscent of the nearly areas that Hillary Clinton almost took in 2016 that Joe Biden carried in 2020. This seems to have been carried out with a raft of election results that otherwise don't make sense, including Hartlepool. It makes for sobering reading, however, for Northern Labour voters, as it suggests that Labour's support in these areas may very well be terminal, with the caveat that the South may have just opened up for them. The problem in all of this is the Labour Party themselves. Labour has serious issues. It is a party riven by division, split on fundamental issues and on deeper ideological lines. Let's talk the ideological divide. Labour is riven in a similar fashion to the US Democrats, between the left and the centrist wing of the parties. In addition to that, you've got people like me in the middle of both halves who don't really fit in either place. Angela Rayner, the deputy leader, is another in this position. The left, usually referred to as Corbynites, but which goes far beyond just that tribe, tends to view politics with a desire to go further left, that if you offer a genuine socialist alternative, people will vote for it because of the authenticity, the value of the policies and the passion which will drive them home. It is often accompanied by a marked disdain for playing politics, using symbols, gestures, and usually decrying stunts and anything associated with flag waving. The centrists, usually referred to as Blairites but who go far beyond that tag, tend to view politics through the prism of there are more people on the centre than there are on the left, and if you capture the centre ground, you win the election. So the party must move its policies to be more palatable for centrist voters in what they term Middle England. Urban, middle-class voters who switch between all 3 parties that are often socially liberal but not too much, want fiscal policies that make them richer but not without too much cost to getting them started up. The centrists are wary of making too many concessions to the left. Both sides often have more vitriol for the other than they do the Tories, with the left calling the centrists Red Tories and the centrists calling the left Trots, as in Trotskyites. Another major point of contention is the role of professionalism in politics. I touched on this in my video about why the left loses, and those points haven't changed. Link is up there. Centrists believe in running professional, slick, and very realist-orientated campaigns that look to learn from successful campaigns from other parties. Leftists despise this approach, believing it demonstrates inauthenticity and dilutes the message, which damages the brand. Diane Abbott, a noted left-wing MP, is emblematic of this problem, writing in Labour List just a few days ago that Tony Benn taught us that politics should be about issues, not personalities. These positions tend to be taken to absolutes, which results almost in caricature positions being taken, whereas people like myself tend to view these issues in a far greyer light. My position, and the consensus I am attempting to build, is that the centrists and the left are both guilty of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, or to steal a phrase, dealing in absolutes.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
The centrist position that leftist policies are the problem is in effect ceding the narrative and accepting that the UK is inherently a conservative country. The leftist position that doing the politics side of politics is dirty is in effect ceding the control of the story to the conservatives. See the problem here? The issue with this is that most people define themselves as the political centre. They're not looking for radical change, they're not looking for ideological points. For most people, it comes to material change and the hope of a better future. If you can't concretely offer that, then they're not going to vote for you. This is where the left constantly falls down. There are a lot of policies, but never a decisive way of communicating those policies in a way people today understand. Take the example of the last socialist to win a national election in Britain, Harold Wilson. Wilson changed his taught received pronunciation accent to the Yorkshire of his native Huddersfield. At every turn, Harold Wilson deployed tricks to make himself more relatable, more like the common man's representative in politics, and he won 4 elections. The left's policy of sticking to this idealism, of not playing politics, hasn't won a single election since Harold Wilson. The problem for centrists is that they come across as inauthentic, and they then need to rely on personality because their policies amount to "we'll manage the system better." This lack of authenticity and governance by focus group really hinders the electoral position and often results in an absurdity where nobody really knows what they stand for, giving credence to the career politician insult and worse, rudderless policies that deliver marginal change. The unification position here is to keep those radical policies but understand the fundamentals of campaigning, which means not calling them radical policies and doing everything you can to call yourself left. You describe them as common sense policies. You focus on real, tangible policies such as jobs and more jobs. You back small businesses and make them the cornerstone of the fight for real jobs for real people, rather than sending jobs for big businesses. You can corner the Tories and destroy their position as a natural party of business, and it looks good for socialists if they're overseeing a growing localised economy rather than talking about nationalising everything. I'd also say there should be an understanding that we never commit to nationalising more than one thing per parliament, simply to ensure it looks and sounds deliverable. The last thing we want to do is let ourselves be tarred with the viewpoint that we can't deliver on anything that we're promising. There's also been a noticeable Green surge as the Green Party has picked up disaffected Labour voters who are unhappy with Starmer's positions. This will become an increasing priority for Starmer as he needs these votes if he is to form the next government. Another really important position to consider is the fact that Welsh Labour roared to victory, resisting the national swing to the Conservatives and, crucially, even taking back Brexit seats from UKIP and the Tories. How have they managed this? Well, on one hand, Welsh Labour is in government, in the devolved administration, and has done a significantly better job than the Conservatives in England when it comes to handling the pandemic. Not only that, but they have developed a clear vision for what they want to do in office and push through that message. It's not perfect, but it is of course a significantly better picture than in other places. Lastly, Scotland. The SNP fell short of a majority again, despite there again being a majority for independence in the Scottish Parliament. However, the caveat being that the raw vote total is roughly 51-49 in favour of unionist parties. Nicola Sturgeon, who spent the majority of the past year saying an SNP majority constitutes a mandate for independence, is now trying to change the goalposts to say a majority of the parliament in favour of independence constitutes a mandate, something she concretely did not say. Labour, despite a poor showing, managed to arrest their decline there, but with Sarwar having so little time to get stuck in, doesn't seem to have made much of an impact. The constitutional position of Scotland will continue to rumble on, but it's worth mentioning this little tidbit of information from my nerdy stock of facts. Should there be another referendum, it is unlikely that it will be a yes-no question, as the Electoral Commission found that having a yes-no question automatically favours the yes side by 2 to 4%. They would instead seek a Remain-Leave question, which the SNP are likely to try and oppose because of the unfortunate association with the Brexit referendum positions. So how does all this tie into Keir Starmer and whether he should resign? Well, first off, no, he shouldn't resign. He's taken over the party after the worst results in a century in the middle of a pandemic, which has severely limited Labour's ability to campaign, especially when government ministers are household names due to what is going on. This will naturally favour the incumbent party. However, that doesn't mean that Starmer hasn't royally screwed up. The communications issue has been a continual mess, with it being amateur hour after amateur hour every hour of every day. One of the major issues in Hartlepool and elsewhere is the appearance of no policies and the lack of clarity on those policies that do actually exist. This, with a stiff approach that makes him seem disingenuous and out of touch, has really not helped against Boris Johnson's more natural, more comfortable, more reassuring body language. His lack of public speaking ability in the face of Johnson's guaffing looks good in the Commons but doesn't translate anywhere else. Picking fights internally in the party has damaged his standing, and this listless approach since November has led the Tories to successfully tar him as Captain Hindsight, which in turn is blunting the attack lines Labour can use. Many of the problems facing Starmer can be fixed and can be addressed moving forward. Many of the problems facing Labour can also be fixed. If anything, these results show how fragile Boris Johnson's electoral coalition is. The council seats in David Cameron, former Conservative Prime Minister's seat, have just switched to Labour. All over the country, Labour are making inroads into Conservative strongholds, while the Tories have made inroads into Labour strongholds. I believe that the vote in these areas, in these former Labour areas, is not so solidly Conservative as they would like to hope, especially as the Conservatives' favourite tactic to undermine Labour's support in these areas is now gone. That is the tactic of cutting the council budget, which then forces what used to be Labour councils to make cuts to services, which the Tories would then use to bounce off as a reason why the area is going to crap. That tactic is now cut off. The UK has spent ridiculous sums of money through COVID because of the Tories' ineptitude and corruption. Traditional Conservative strongholds are now demanding another round of austerity to pay down the debt accrued and to cut taxes to encourage growth. Obviously, I don't agree with their method, but this is what is going to be demanded of the government. This then puts the Conservative government in a very difficult place because the new seats they've won in the north were won on the promise of investment. These two ends are diametric opposites. You cannot deliver both of those things. Boris Johnson and by extension Rishi Sunak have to either sacrifice their heartlands or their gains, which will weaken their position at the next election, especially without the twin unifiers of revulsion of Jeremy Corbyn and the Brexit vote. Labour is in a precarious position. A slight slip on either side could be fatal, but proceeding forward could deliver the government so desperately craved. Whether Labour can proceed sure of foot or not is going to define the next decade for the United Kingdom. That's my take. What is yours? You can let me know in the comments or on the Discord server. If you like the content, help the channel grow by sharing and subscribing. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.